culture. Welcome everyone. This is another webinar of Mind the Crack, your online life hacks. So today we're going to be looking at an introduction to a new short series we're doing on relationship advice. So it's very broadly titled Relationship Advice. But before I get started, I just want to let you know, for all of you that have joined me through YouTube, Instagram or on Facebook, that I'm here live on a Zoom chat. So in the future, if you want to join me and interact more directly, you can do so by registering with Eventbrite or any of the different locations that we're allowing you to do that, so you can engage with me directly. Because I am here in a Zoom chat, and if you're with me, I'm going to say hello to everyone there that's on Zoom. If you have any questions or anything you'd like to originate during this Zoom meeting or this webinar, it'd be great to hear from you as I talk about some of these broad concepts of relationship advice. And if you are there, I see someone with me on Zoom. If you want to give me a wave or a thumbs up of some sort just to let me know that you're attentive and ready to go, that'd be wonderful to get that from you. If you are on the other platforms, you can submit comments in the comment section, and I have a host, Michelle, who is also following on the other platforms, and she will relay to me any of your questions or otherwise to me live here in Zoom. So I will go ahead and get started. I'm just going to put another little reaction here to my chat box and give a little bit of a wave to everyone there that's in on Zoom. Okay. So let's get started. Relationship advice. Interpersonal relationships. Relationships with other people, whether they be your family, your partner, whether they're your extended group of friends, your work colleagues, or even complete strangers. There are certain principles that govern how to improve those relationships and how to make it so that not necessarily everyone is getting along. I think that's a bit of a false idea that everyone gets along or has perfect agreement, because we all have different ideas on how to do things, different upbringings, different religions. But it's to achieve understanding. And when you understand your fellow man, whether it be anyone from each of those groups, that understanding then allows things like, and you've heard these different words, things like tolerance or gratification, gratitude, all of these different types of things and how you relate to other people, they fall under some very, let's say, all-encompassing sort of concepts, which I'm going to start with today. And one thing just to sort of mention is that there is a lot of information out there and the internet when you can just search for any of the topics that we've covered, whether it be relationships, whether it be, we also covered a subject, motivation, study and learning, communication, all these different things. There's so much information that anyone can get their hands on today. And if you just are doing a YouTube search for what content you can view online, you'll be inundated with a huge volume of information on any given subject. And so the thing that I want to let you know is that all of the webinars that we're doing are based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard. Now, L. Ron Hubbard wrote this book, The Way to Happiness. It's not a religious book. It actually is non-secular. It is a secular book, and it is something that contains just general principles of how to achieve happiness in life. And I'm bringing this book up in particular because it has 21 different precepts, or 21 different principles, which if you operate by them, they will help you live a happy life. But there are some in there that I think are very broad and cover a lot of ground, and in applying them, you will have huge improvements, huge gains in improving relationships, maintaining them, making them grow, etc., and that sort of thing. So, getting back to, L. Ron Hubbard has a lot of work done in all aspects of life, whether it be in business, whether it be setting goals, and those other subjects we've covered, communication, motivation, etc., etc. There's so much there. And the difference with the works of L. Ron Hubbard compared to the huge amount of information there is out on the internet is that L. Ron Hubbard has managed to codify everything. And when I say codify, what I mean is put things in an arrangement where their relationship is delineated, is defined, and it is easy to understand. There are a lot of things that go in sequence. like when talking about understanding the emotions of other human beings. L. Ron Hubbard actually discovered what's called the emotional tone scale, which is a scale going from, one level, let's say a low level to a high level, and each of the steps on that scale and the different emotions that occur as one descends from bottom of, absolute death, let's say, to the higher levels and positive emotions. So, as an example, that emotional tone scale has then been related to communication. How do people at certain levels or certain emotions, how do they communicate with you? And in addition to that, when it comes to setting your targets and goals, how does your emotion relate to executing or getting your goals achieved? And therefore, when motivation towards getting goals achieved, how does that relate to plans that you might have in a relationship? And how do you coordinate a relationship or a group of people together to achieve different things through using communication? Now, I hope I didn't confuse you there, but the point I wanted to get across is that all of these different aspects of life within the works of L. Ron Hubbard have been put together in a very systematic, very understandable and related body of data, and that is Dianetics and Scientology. So, for that reason, taking in any of L. Ron Hubbard's works and understanding how broad they are and understanding the relationships within them and how that information is therefore more easily absorbable into a whole, I think that's one reason for you to check out further any one of these books that we're showing on the webinar. Okay, so that said, out of the way, let me continue on with this whole idea of orderliness, okay? Codification or orderliness. When you're understanding life or when you're looking at life, it can seem very confusing. There's so many different aspects. There's yourself, there's everybody else, there's the physical universe, there's so many different subjects to study, so many different things to get interested in, that when you consider all of life, and you can be overwhelmed by how much there is to know, certainly having an encyclopedic level of knowledge in many subjects today is very, very difficult, extremely difficult, if not impossible, because the depth that every single subject has been carried along by different professionals. So in that way, because things can seem so confusing, there are some, let's say, templates or some, mental sort of compartmenting that L. Ron Hubbard has done in regard to life that'll help you understand it better. And let me start with the first one. So the first thing L. Ron Hubbard termed the dynamics, and there are 8 dynamics. The first dynamic is you, yourself. So if you look at the compartment of life, which is you, that is the first dynamic. And everything about you, your clothes, your name, your identity, how you look, all that sort of thing, your own thoughts and ideas and dreams and things like that. Everything that is about you would be that first one. So that you could say is that first compartment. And each of these other aspects are put together in the same way. So the second dynamic, the second compartment, is to do with family, yourself and your partner, and also the sexual act and all the aspects that go with that type of a relationship and those people in that particular compartment. Then there is the third compartment, the third dynamic, which has to do with groups. How do groups react and relate? What sort of things are identifying a group? How does a group cooperate and work together? Whether it be your group of friends, whether it be your work, whether it be a sports team, whether it be a whole nation, all of those would fit into the whole idea of groups, the existence of groups and that compartment. So then the fourth dynamic, the fourth compartment, would be that of all mankind. So whether they be from Egypt or Australia or Azerbaijan, they are all within the fourth dynamic. The fifth dynamic goes into all living things, so including plants and animals. The sixth dynamic, or the sixth compartment, goes into everything in the physical universe, everything that exists, from all the planets in space, the suns, the stars, everything that's on this planet, everything that you can see, the material things, the rocks, etc., etc. So that would be in the sixth compartment, or as L. Ron Hubbard termed them, dynamics, the sixth dynamic. The seventh dynamic is that existence of all things that are to do with spirits. So you could say the soul. In some circles that terminology is understood. You could say it's a spirit, the spiritual being. The existence of spirits is that seventh compartment. And then in the eighth compartment, the eighth dynamic, it is considered to be the infinity dynamic, or it could be called the God dynamic. It is the acknowledgement of the existence of some greater power or some greater force that is potentially the creator of everything, that has an infinite entity, an infinite beingness of some sort, and that would be the eighth compartment. So that doesn't leave anything out. You can see how that puts all aspects of life in one of these different compartments. Now the next thing to know, the next sort of jump of thought to help to understand these different dynamics is that life is attempting to survive, and the lowest common denominator of existence is that urge, that drive to survive. So that first dynamic, you yourself, you are and being driven by the urge to survive. Same with the second dynamic. You want your second dynamic to survive. You want your family to do well. You want your partner to do well. That is the drive of the second dynamic. The third dynamic is the same thing. Each of them have their urge to survive. The third dynamic has an example. A group comes together, forms a company, forms a sports team. And even though that third dynamic is made up of individuals' first dynamics, that third dynamic has its own urge to survive. That team wants to go on. And even if you leave that team as a first dynamic being removed from that third dynamic still has the urge to survive, still has the impulse or the drive to continue on. Now there may be a founder of that group, and even if the founder leaves, that group can continue to survive because it has its own compartment, its own idea of surviving. So in that way, when you couple the concept of survival along with each of these dynamics, all of a sudden life starts to open up and become more orderly, and you can understand it more. So let me take the next step from that. 8 dynamics, each of them trying to survive. What is the next step? So since we're talking about relationships, we're talking about, well, you could have intrapersonal relationships, how you relate to yourself, but that's not what we're going to be dealing with today, because that's kind of like you and your relationship with your mind and your body. And when I say you, I mean you as a spiritual being, not you as in your whole package together. I'm actually separating the parts of you, of man, which we can go over later too. But the next point is, in interpersonal relationships, there is always some sort of separation of terminals. There is yourself and then perhaps something else. There's yourself and another first dynamic of another person. There is yourself and the other people within that second dynamic. There is yourself and other people in the third dynamic, or individuals within a different third dynamic. So these interpersonal relationships all really basically revolve around survival and agreement. And I'm going to break that down a little bit for you. So as we went over the dynamics, they're all trying to survive. So that's the first and most basic, lowest common denominator. It doesn't matter who you're dealing with or what entity you're dealing with, it is also trying to survive. Then the next thing we bring along is this point of agreement. Now why do I single out agreement? Well, if you had listened to some earlier webinars, I spoke of a relationship that L. Ron Hubbard found between 3 things. The 3 things are affinity, reality, and communication. So these 3 things form a triangle: affinity, reality, and communication. Now communication is the most important part of that triangle, because through communication you can establish reality, and through communication there can be some affinity. Because after all, perception and even the senses gaining information is part of communication. So communication is kind of like the starting point. And communication has to happen if you're relating to anyone. Otherwise, if you didn't know them, that they weren't there, how could you communicate with them, right? So, putting that communication point as the most important point aside for a second, agreement is very, very important. And to illustrate that, you'll understand that in life, as things evolve through civilization, you saw more and more development of these methods of agreement. And perhaps at the beginning there was trading of some sort. You know, I have a chicken who lays hens, and you have a donkey that can transport different things, and so there's exchange that takes place. So there has to be some sort of agreement in that relationship, for it to be, let's say, mutual or at least positive. I have to agree that I want to give you something, and then in return you're going to give me something. So there has to be agreement in that, because if there's no agreement, and I don't agree that my hen that lays 5 eggs a day is equivalent to your donkey, and you take my hen anyway, then that is criminal. So that's not really a relationship that we want to foster. So that's why I say agreement, as that you could sort of look at the beginning of civilization, starting through the ages, evolved from agreement. And we went from exchange in that way to then all of a sudden things like gold coins and currency started to come about. I'll give you this gold coin because this gold coin is worth 1 donkey. So I'll give you the gold coin, you give me the donkey. And see, again, agreement is at play in that transaction. And then when things got beyond the object exchange stage, they went into legal contracts. They went into things written down, the laws of the land. In medieval times and things of that sort, the king would decree something verbally, and then it became a law and everyone had to follow it. And perhaps things were exchanged verbally, but there was definitely a lot of things that get written down. And that sort of stuff then has become today where we see rules, regulations, things in writing, laws of the land, and what these are basically are ideas or concepts that are set down that everyone must agree to. So that's law, things that must be agreed to. You go around anywhere these days and you see all sorts of signs to try and get your agreement. So they're official type things. And even though they might be official, and agreements in that way, agreements in, let's say, personal social relationships are just as important. So, to give you the first bit of information on that, I want to send you again to this book, The Way to Happiness. And the last 3 precepts or principles are very important, and they cover this idea of agreement, and they cover this idea of survival. And when I give them to you, you'll see how they relate, and I would like to hear your thoughts if you have any at all. Okay, so precept number 19 is try not to do things to others that you would not like them to do to you. So you'll see how that relates to the dynamics. There's you and others, all the other dynamics, and there is survival linked in with that. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to survive. You're trying to get along better in life. You're trying to expand and improve your abilities. You're trying to, do better in whatever way it is. Now, if you're trying to do that and you're trying to survive, it would be fair to ask, as it says, try not to do things to others that you would not like them to do to you. So if you're trying to survive, you would like them to do things to you to help you to survive. You would not like them to stop your survival. So in that same way, your viewpoint with regard to other people is trying not to stop their survival. And by following that precept, you'll see how that links in with agreement, because if 2 people have an agreement that doing something, some activity is going to help both survive, you'll see how that brings a relationship together. There'll be agreement. If you have 2 people that have different ideas on what it is to try and survive, this guy will do to you something that you don't consider is going to help you survive. So that lack of agreement in what it is or what it means to survive will lead to some sort of separation in the relationship, or at least not agreeing, as you can see that. Okay, so let me move on to the next one. Try to treat others, so this is precept 20, try to treat others as you would want them to treat you. So again, this is the reverse of that negative. So 19 was trying to not do things that you don't want done to you, and the other positive, 20, as we go here, try to treat others as you would want them to treat you. So again, you can see how this comes down to that concept of survival and agreement. What are you trying to do? Survive. What do you want other people to do to you? Things that help you survive. So in that way, when you regard other people, you have an idea or a concept of what it means to survive. That's your reality. And you do something to another person that you would be okay with them doing to you, because hey, it's a survival thing. You would be okay with that. And with that sort of agreement on you treating them and them treating you in a certain way that helps survival, you can see how that would bring a relationship together. People that hold the same ideas on how to survive, they naturally come together. Okay, that's that point of agreement. So, by the way, this book here contains a lot more information on these two precepts. I'm just giving you the very basic, kind of like the title, the name of the principle. And this book certainly goes into a lot more detail, each of those. So I do recommend that you pick that up to have a little bit of a look in that. Okay, so 21. The last precept given in this book is flourish and prosper. And again, you can see how that relates to survival. So if you, as an individual, just your first dynamic, you are doing really, really well. You're flourishing in life, you're achieving all the things you want to, and you are prospering. So you're doing it to a very high level or an abundance of those things that you want to achieve, then you're doing very, very well. Now, in that situation, if we relate that to those previous two, you're surviving well. When other people look upon you with any sort of an idea, what are they going to see? They're going to see that you're surviving. Are they going to have agreement with that? They're going to say, yeah, that guy is surviving. I agree with survival. I am going to have more affinity or more liking for that particular person because they are surviving well. Now, of course, I'm being extremely general. There might be certain things that people don't agree with, that sort of thing. Like perhaps you're a keto diet and follower. And I've certainly been witness to some conversations where people who are keto and not keto or not understanding, there certainly have been a lot of emotions brought up as a result of those types of conversations. But if you're a keto person and you're looking at someone who owns a bakery, you might think that's totally the wrong way to survive. You're making society sick. But someone who's about to have a birthday, who needs a birthday cake and wants to have a great celebration with a bit of yummy, sugary, bready sort of things, is going to think that that baker actually is surviving really, really well if they have a great bakery. So there are opinions and ideas and these differing sort of flavors or colors in life, as you can understand with that. But by you flourishing and prospering yourself, it sets an example for others to see that what you're doing is surviving, and they can have more agreement with you simply because of the fact that you are surviving. So throw those around your mind a little bit. Look at how agreement and the point of survival mixes with the relationships that you're currently encountering or having difficulties or not with. Having a look at how can you help that person survive? How would you want them to help you to survive and do the same in return? If someone's doing something to you that isn't compatible with your survival and you don't want them to do it to you, well, have a look. What are you doing to others that isn't helping their survival? So evaluating your relationships with people on the point of survival, on the point of try not to do things to others that you would not like them to do to you, and try to treat others as you would want them to treat you, and also flourishing and prospering. Just by those first few points, you should be able to get have a few cognitions, and realize some things that you can do to improve your relationships. So, before I go, I just wanted to check in one last time, and I'm going to check with Michelle on the other platforms there and ask her if there's any questions at all, or any comments, anything that we have. If you had any questions or comments on this subject, it'd be great to hear from you, because I am going to do a number of them over the next week or two leading up to Christmas, because we are definitely going to encounter people that we have relationships with family, extended family that we don't see very often, and Christmas is a great time of year to contribute to survival across the dynamics, across those different compartments, to help you survive better and help others survive better, and therefore everyone flourishing and prospering. Okay, good. So I just hear from Michelle that there are no questions across any of the platforms. I do recommend to you, as a starting point, if you want to improve relationships, that you take a look at this book, The Way to Happiness. It has these 21 precepts, of which, when you follow them, that you will certainly lead a happier life, and it will help with your relationships You might take a lot out of it, you might take only a few things out of it. Anyway, it's full of truths about life, and as I said, all the information in the writings of L. Ron Hubbard are related to all these other parts. So it is a very logical and a book set out in a great way for you to understand and get the most out of it. So for the moment, just checking with Michelle, we have no comments, no questions. The next webinar that we're doing is also on relationships, improving relationships, and you'll see me use some of these principles in a little bit more detail. If you want to come prepared, do log into the Zoom meeting so that you can engage with me, and in that way we can, get some benefit for you, because that is the reason that we're doing this, not as a video but as a webinar, to engage and see if you have any questions. Now, I do have a question that has just come in, and we're looking at this triangle. Yes, we're looking at the triangle that L. Ron Hubbard discovered, so I'm going to give that to you again very briefly. So L. Ron Hubbard discovered a relationship between three things, and the three things are affinity, reality, and communication. The word affinity means the degree of likingness, so how much you like someone. So do you have a strong emotion that's positive towards them, or do you have an emotion that is opposite? It also is related to the distance, the tolerance of distance. If you like someone and you have high affinity for them, you want them to be in your space. You don't mind being very, very close to them. If you have a low affinity for someone, you don't want them in your space. So that aspect of distance comes into it, as well as emotion. So that's affinity. Reality has to do with what things does the person consider are real. So do you consider this to be a microphone? Do you consider this to be a flower? Is it a gerbera? Is it, what type of flower is it? But these real things, the real things in the physical universe that we can see and touch, this is a book, this is a table, etc., that is the basis of reality. So it also is to do with agreement, because you could see or understand that if I said that was a gerbera and you said, no, that's actually a weed, then that conflict, we don't share the same reality. I might get that for someone as a gift, and you might say, I would throw that in the trash. And if I gave it to you as a gift, you might think, why are you pulling weeds from my garden? So because there would be a different reality, therefore it wouldn't suit for me to give that to you as a gift, if that gives you the idea. Okay, so reality has to do with agreement, the real things in life, and what people say are there, and what their reality on that thing is. And the last one was communication. And communication doesn't just involve me talking, saying, writing, signing words, symbols to another person. It is also covering perception. So I'm receiving communication from the lights that are lighting the little mini studio that we have here. I'm perceiving the different noises of the air conditioner. So that is a communication. It is a message of some sort that's coming to me that registers that I can perceive. So communication covers all those aspects. And the relationship of these three things in the triangle is that if you improve or increase one aspect of the triangle, it will raise the other two. If you approach a conversation with someone at a very positive emotion, that you have a high degree of liking for them, and you express or show that with smiles or even words of appreciation, I'm really glad for you to be here, it's so great to see you, that's going to improve the communication with that person. It's also going to improve the reality of that person to you, because like, wow, this person, I want to survive, this person thinks that I'm here and it's great that I'm here, and that's my survival as well. So each of these parts of the triangle, the points of the triangle, if you raise one, you raise the other two. And conversely, if you lower one, you will lower the other two. So that's how that triangle works. Hopefully that answered that question that just came through. So yes, it is a triangle. It is the ARC triangle. So hopefully that was a good answer to the question there that came in on Zoom. Okay, well, I'm going to finish up now. I will be back tomorrow with another webinar, same time. More different aspects of relationship. We're going to go into some of the different principles in the philosophy of Scientology and how that applies to your life. Some things that you may have never heard before, but things that were definitely practical and workable for you to use. So, great. Okay, we got that answered. Shanae, for today, we'll see you in the next webinar.